Dennis Schroder probably isn't in any financial bind, but the former Los Angeles Lakers point guard has reportedly turned down a $92 million deal. Why? Schroder believed he was deserving of anywhere between $100 and $120 million. The athlete is currently on a one-year contract with the Boston Celtics for $5.9 million. Playing for the Celtics, Schroder has had ample opportunity to prove why he was deserving of that $100 million. Let's get into it. How long did Dennis Schroder play for the Los Angeles Lakers? Having played for the Oklahoma City Thunder for well over 2 years, the German basketball player was traded to the Los Angeles Lakers back in November of 2020. The exchange was made for Danny Green and the draft's first-round pick for Jaden McDaniels. Schroder played for the Los Angeles Lakers from 2020 till 2021. During his debut, the point guard put up 14 points, 12 rebounds, and 8 assists. While the Lakers ultimately lost to the Los Angeles Clippers in a 116-109 game, Schroder's debut performance was commended. Schroder went on to play 61 games during the NBA's regular season with an average of 15.4 points throughout, along with 5.8 assists. His shooting percentage was recorded at 43.7% from the field and 33.5% on three-pointers. In spite of his performance, Schroder was sidelined by the Lakers twice during his one-year contract. When they approached the German player with an $84 million extension on Schroder's existing contract, he countered with a whopping number of his own. The Lakers then traded for point guard Russell Westbrook. What's the Birds' right trap? Speaking on Schroder's $100 to $120 million counteroffer to the Lakers' $84 million extension offer, John Hollinger referred to the entire ordeal as the Birds' right trap. The term has been used consistently in NBA history with instances of other players and teams in similar situations. Basically, a team gets a player's full bird rights after they spend 3 years with that team without leaving in free agency. If a player doesn't sign on for 3 years with the team loses the right to circumvent the league's salary cap. Also known as the qualifying veteran free agency extension, the Bird's rights are part of the NBA's collective bargaining agreements. Named after Larry Bird, this clause allows the team to go over the NBA's salary cap for a player who had previously played with them for 3 years, 3 years consecutively, 2-year contracts followed by a 1-year one, or 3 one-year contracts. What might have motivated the Lakers to accept Dennis Schroder's counteroffer? Understanding the Bird's rights trap, the Lakers would have had to use their mid-level exception to replace Schroder if he decided to walk. While Schroder's performance was commendable during the regular season, his stats did decrease towards the end of the year. The Lakers might not have been looking to pay him $20 million a season or more, but letting him go would have meant re-signing players such as Alex Caruso or Talen Horton-Tucker using the mid-level exception. The alternative to this would have been to land a player worse than Schroder using the same mid-level exception. The Lakers might have been in a tight spot. That didn't necessarily mean that they were cornered from all fronts. Schroder, for his part, would have come down to $84 million because that was the maximum the Lakers could pay him under their max extension from the CBA. The negotiations began in mid-June of 2021, and an official decision would have been reached by the 1st of August. The free agency market would then open on August the 2nd. Was Schroder deserving of the $100 to $120 million? Armin Andres, president of the German Basketball Association, certainly thinks so. In an official statement to Abelung Basketball Podcast, Andres spoke about the rumor surrounding Schroder's decision to settle for nothing short of triple digits. Dennis Schroder has communicated this clearly. He wants $100 or $120 million, which he will probably also get, and this sum insured cannot be insured on the normal market at this time. However, not everyone felt as if Dennis Schroder was deserving of as much as he was asking for. During his one-year run with the Lakers, Schroder's numbers dropped in the playoffs to 14.3 points with 2.8 assists. His shooting percentage also dropped to 40.3 from the field and 31.9 from the three-point range. How did critics react to Schroder's counteroffer? It's important to understand that while the Birds' rights trap put the Lakers in a tough spot, they weren't without any other options. Alternatively, neither was Schroder. However, for the teams that were requiring point guards during the new season, none of them would offer Schroder the amount the Lakers were willing to settle for, and definitely not the amount he was seeking. Speaking from a critical standpoint, some critics believe that it was unreasonable for Schroder to be asking for $100 million given his performance decline for the Lakers. At $100 million, the German point guard was looking to make $25 million a season. This would be the same as what the Bucks played Jrue Holiday or what the Celtics played Jaylen Brown. One critic commented that the $84 million being offered to Schroder would be the equivalent of what Fran VanVleet signed on with the Raptors for last offseason, and VanVleet is a better player. Was a decision ultimately reached? It was. The Lakers and Schroder ultimately parted ways in a decision that was announced on August 1st. The Lakers then looked at the free agency market for a new point guard and ultimately decided on Russell Westbrook. Did Schroder get the amount he was asking for? Not necessarily. Dennis Schroder signed on with the Boston Celtics on the 13th of August for a one-year contract worth $5.9 million. The contract was a taxpayer mid-level exception, ironically what the Lakers thought they'd have to face with Schroder's counteroffer. The Celtics were in search of a backcourt depth player, and Schroder fit the bill. This, plus the fact that he was now at a discounted price, meant the Celtics got him for cheap. The team had recently moved on from their starting point guard Kemba Walker and were looking for an apt replacement. He wore the number 17 for the Lakers, but Schroder wore the number 71 for the Celtics because the number had been retired by the team in honor of John Havlicek. How has Schroder been taking the downgrade in pay? Dennis Schroder is still one of the richest people in the world. He's making more a season than most people would be in a lifetime. However, the fact that he lost out on approximately $74 million and that his deal backfired did put him in a situation where he was both criticized and ridiculed. The question then becomes, how has he been dealing with it? On an Instagram post posted on his birthday, Schroder wrote, "I'm gonna do this one time." Schroder wrote in the caption of a picture of him with two of his expensive cars, "Insert your best fumbled the bag joke here." Kudos to Schroder for being a sport about the situation. The Lakers might not have signed with him, but the player eventually managed a reasonable position with the Celtics, another reasonable team, albeit not as good as the Lakers for the current season. In the picture, Schroder can be seen in front of his cars, hunching down with his head in his hands and his luggage beside him. While Schroder might have missed out on a reportedly great deal, it's nice to see the German point guard taking it in high spirits. Schroder will be able to present his case again in the next offseason if he plays exceptionally well for the Boston Celtics. It's about proving he can put his money where his mouth is. Has Schroder proved his worth? Back when the negotiations were going on, several critics voiced their opinions on how the German point guard was being unreasonable with the amount he was asking for. In one Twitter post, Dennis Schroder believes he's a $100 million player, but the Lakers see him as a sixth man. Ultimately, parties both decided to part ways. The Lakers were in need of a point guard, and Schroder could not have come at a better time for them. The German point guard was also now available at a discounted price, which worked for their taxpayer reserves. People were keen to keep up with how Schroder had been proving his worth to the Celtics. It looks like he's been doing exceptionally well. Dennis Schroder was instrumental in the Celtics' 145-117 win over the Blazers, putting up a fantastic 31-point, 8-assist performance, averaging 17.9 points, 4.9 assists, and 3.7 rebounds. Schroder will definitely earn himself a more rewarding contract next year than the current one he is playing on. The Lakers and Schroder reportedly engaged in extension talks, but Jovan Buha and Bill Aram reported that the two sides were far apart and the guard was seeking a multi-year extension that would pay him more than $20 million a year. By August 1st of 2020, it was ultimately decided that both parties would be signing on with different players and teams. This meant an approximate $74 million downfall for Dennis Schroder with his $5.9 million one-year contract with the Boston Celtics, but his recent performance with the team has proved that he's looking to get back with his asking price next offseason. Thanks for watching.